the last day of death row inmate Donald Moeller, the crime that shocked South Dakota. At 10:01 p.m. inside the South Dakota State Penitentiary, Donald Eugene Moeller was strapped to a gurney. In just minutes, the state would carry out its first execution in more than 60 years. But the story that led to that moment began 22 years earlier with a simple bike ride. On a warm spring evening in May 1990, 9-year-old Becky O'Connell left her home in Sioux Falls to run a quick errand to a nearby store. It was only a few blocks away, a trip she had made before. She never came back. The next morning, a jogger made a discovery along the banks of the Big Sioux River that would shake the entire community. Within hours, a citywide search turned into a homicide investigation. For decades, Becky's family waited for justice. This is the story of the man who took her life, the investigation that followed, and the final hours of the prisoner who became the first person executed in South Dakota in 65 years. Rebecca Lynn O'Connell was 9 years old in the spring of 1990. Her family called her Becky. She was a fourth-grade student at Oakwood Elementary School in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Friends described her as cheerful, curious, and bright. She enjoyed reading, had recently started learning the piano, and loved helping her mother with baking projects in the kitchen. Like many children her age, her life revolved around school, friends, and simple routines. On the evening of May 8, 1990, Becky asked her mother if she could ride her bicycle to a nearby convenience store to buy sugar for a recipe. The store was only a few blocks away, and it was a trip Becky had taken before. Sioux Falls at that time was widely considered a quiet and safe community, the kind of place where children could still ride their bikes through the neighborhood without much concern. Around 6:30 p.m., Becky left home on her bicycle. It was the last time her family saw her alive. When Becky did not return home within a reasonable amount of time, her family became worried. Initially, they believed she might have stopped to visit a friend or had simply been delayed. But as the evening progressed and there was still no sign of her, the concern quickly turned to alarm. Police were notified, and a search effort began almost immediately. Neighbors joined the search, walking through streets, parks, and nearby areas calling Becky's name. Flyers were posted across Sioux Falls. Volunteers gathered throughout the night hoping to find the missing child. The following morning, May 9th, a jogger running near the banks of the Big Sioux River made a horrifying discovery. Becky's body had been left in a wooded area near the river. The news spread quickly through Sioux Falls. The disappearance of a child had already shaken the community, but confirmation of her death sent a wave of shock and grief through the city. Parents kept their children close, schools discussed safety, and investigators faced enormous pressure to find the person responsible. The Sioux Falls Police Department launched what would become one of the largest investigations in the state's history. However, detectives faced major challenges. The crime occurred in an era before widespread surveillance cameras, mobile phones, or digital tracking. There were no cameras capturing traffic, no phone records to analyze, and no instant databases linking suspects to evidence. What investigators did have was the crime scene itself, tire impressions near the area where Becky's body was found, and scattered physical evidence that could potentially link a suspect to the crime. Police began interviewing residents, canvassing neighborhoods, and reviewing every possible lead. Tips began pouring in. Some people reported suspicious vehicles in the area. Others mentioned strangers seen near neighborhoods around the time Becky disappeared. Each tip had to be followed, verified, and investigated. Days passed, then weeks. The investigation continued, but no immediate suspect emerged. Meanwhile, Sioux Falls struggled with fear and uncertainty. Parents who once allowed children to walk or bike alone now insisted on supervision. Community gatherings focused on safety awareness. The sense of security many residents once felt had been permanently shaken. 4 months after Becky's death, investigators received a crucial lead. In September 1990, an anonymous tip was called into the police department naming a possible suspect, Donald Eugene Moeller. Moeller was 35 years old and already known to law enforcement. His record included previous offenses involving burglary and assault. Investigators also learned that he drove a vehicle that could potentially match the tire impressions found near the crime scene. Detectives brought Moeller in for questioning. During the interview, several details raised concern. He could not provide a reliable alibi for the evening Becky disappeared. His statements contained inconsistencies, and investigators believed he might be withholding information. Eventually, Moeller confessed. According to investigators, he admitted to abducting Becky while she was riding her bicycle. He described taking her to a remote area near the river where the attack occurred. He also provided specific details about the crime that had not been released publicly. Those details convinced investigators that the confession was genuine. Moeller was arrested and formally charged with kidnapping, first-degree rape, and first-degree murder. In February 1992, nearly 2 years after the crime, Donald Moeller went on trial. The prosecution's case included Moeller's confession, physical evidence collected from the crime scene, and testimony linking his vehicle to tire impressions near where Becky's body had been found. Investigators also presented blood evidence discovered on Moeller's clothing. At the time, DNA technology was still developing, and testing methods were far less advanced than those used today. However, forensic testing indicated that the blood on Moeller's clothing matched Becky's blood type, a detail that supported the prosecution's case. Moeller's defense team argued that his confession had been coerced. They claimed investigators pressured him into admitting to a crime he did not commit. They also challenged the reliability of the forensic evidence. Despite those arguments, the jury found him guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Donald Moeller to death. For Becky's family, the verdict brought a sense of justice. After 2 years of uncertainty and grief, the person responsible for their daughter's death had been convicted. But the legal process was not over. In 1996, 4 years after the conviction, the South Dakota Supreme Court overturned Moeller's death sentence due to a procedural error during the trial. The court ruled that certain testimony presented by the prosecution had unfairly influenced the jury. The decision shocked Becky's family and the Sioux Falls community. The conviction itself was not completely erased, but Moeller would need to face a new trial. During that period, he was even briefly released on bond while legal proceedings continued. Meanwhile, forensic science was evolving rapidly. By the mid-1990s, DNA testing had advanced significantly. Techniques that were unavailable during the original investigation were now capable of providing far more precise results. Prosecutors ordered new DNA testing on biological evidence collected from the crime scene. The results were definitive. The DNA matched Donald Moeller with extremely high certainty, providing powerful scientific confirmation linking him directly to the crime. In September 1997, Moeller's second trial began. This time, the prosecution relied heavily on the new DNA evidence, combined with witness testimony, physical evidence, and Moeller's earlier statements about the crime. The defense again attempted to challenge the evidence, questioning the reliability of the DNA testing and suggesting possible contamination of samples. However, the jury ultimately rejected those arguments. Moeller was once again found guilty, and once again, he was sentenced to death. Over the next 15 years, his attorneys filed numerous appeals in state and federal courts. They challenged aspects of the trial, questioned forensic evidence, and argued that the death penalty itself was unconstitutional. Each appeal was reviewed and eventually denied. By 2012, Moeller had exhausted all legal options. South Dakota scheduled his execution for October 30th, 2012. On the afternoon of October 30th, 2012, prison officials followed standard execution protocol. Moeller was offered the opportunity to choose a final meal. At 10:01 p.m., the lethal injection process began. The drugs were administered according to the state's execution protocol. Within minutes, Moeller lost consciousness. At 10:24 p.m., prison officials pronounced Donald Eugene Moeller dead. His execution marked the first time in 65 years that South Dakota had carried out a death sentence. More than 20 years passed between the day Becky O'Connell left her home on a bicycle and the night Donald Moeller faced his execution. For the legal system, October 30th, 2012 marked the end of a long process of investigation, trials, and appeals. For the state of South Dakota, it was a historic moment. The first execution carried out in 65 years. But for Becky's family, the outcome was far more complicated. Justice had been delivered according to the law, yet the absence at the center of their lives remained unchanged. The little girl who loved reading, who was learning piano, who simply wanted to help her mother bake cookies, never came home. Executions can close court cases. They cannot restore stolen childhoods, and they cannot erase the quiet question that lingers long after the headlines fade, whether true closure is ever possible when a life is taken so early and so senselessly.